In this video, I'm going to talk to you about simplifying algebraic fractions using prime factorization. Before I begin, I'm going to review you about how to simplify a basic proper fraction. If I start with 12/20ths, we look for the greatest common factor of 12 and 20. You have done the greatest common factors by listing the factors of each number. So the factors of 12 would be 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. 20, you would have 1 and 20, 2 and 10, no 3 because it's not divisible by 3, 4, and 5. Then you look at both columns and you determine what is the greatest common factor that will divide both 12 and 20, and you see that they have a 4 is the largest number that will divide both of them. So then you divide 12/20ths by 4, and your reduced fraction is 3/5. That's one way to reduce a proper fraction. Another way is to look 25/30. Notice that 25 ends in a 5 and 30 ends in a 0. So you know, according to your divisibility rules, that both numbers are divisible by 5. So I'm going to divide the numerator and denominator by 5. And I get 5/6. And then that becomes my reduced or simplest form of that fraction. Now let's look at a proper fraction if you had 4/8. 4/8, we know that both numerator and denominator is both divisible by 2, but we also know that they're both divisible by 4. So when I divide both numerator and denominator by 4, I get 1/2. What if the fraction was reversed and was not a proper fraction? Instead, it was an improper fraction. If we had 36/18. Hence, I know that 36 is divisible by 6, and I know 18 is divisible by 6. So let's divide both by 6, and that gives me 6/3. But wait, I know 6/3 is not in reduced form, so I'm going to end up dividing both of them by 3, and my simplest form is going to be 2/1. Notice the difference between these two examples right here. We had a 1 in the numerator on the 4/8, and when it was an improper, we ended with the 1 in the denominator. Now let's look at an algebraic fraction that contains variables and exponents. I'll start with a simple one. If we start with a to the 7th, and I want to divide that by a to the 5th. In order for us to reduce this algebraic fraction, first thing I'm going to ask you to do is to apply the prime factorization of the numerator. In other words, we're going to take a to the 7th and write it as a product of primes. So I'm going to write it as a times a times a times a times a times a times a, divided by a to the 5th means a times a times a times a times a. Now that they are in prime factorization form, you can see that both numerator and denominator has an A in common, so I'm going to cross out that A, cross out this A. I'm dividing both numerator and denominator by the A when I cross them out. So now what is left is A squared, and when you cross out everything in the denominator, it's understood to be over 1, so your result is A squared. Okay, now let's look at one like A to the third divided by A to the fifth. I'm going to factor A cubed, A times A times A, and I factor A to the fifth, A times A times A times A times A. Again, we have a common factor of A, another common factor of A, and another common factor of A. Right opposite of the one that I just worked, the numerator all divided out. So when you have the same number divided by itself, your result is 1, and you have A squared on the bottom. So there's the difference between those. Notice where the larger exponents are. Okay, now let's throw in some numbers, some coefficients with our variables. If I gave you 4AB squared divided by 12A to the third B, we want to factor the numerator using prime factorization. 4 will break down to 2 times 2. A is just A, and B is B times B. Divided by 12, I know will break down to 4 times 3, but I know that 4 will break down to 2 times 2 times 3. Then I have 3 A's, and I have 1 B. Then when I cross out what they have in common, they have a common factor of 2, another common factor of 2, a common factor of A, and a common factor of B. So my reduced version of the original fraction is going to be B over 3A squared. If I were to ask you what the GCF would be, the GCF is equal to what you crossed out. 2 times 2 times A times B, which would be 4AB.